The state of Illinois will invest an additional $160 million via the Department of Human Services, specifically to address these bottlenecks, providing support to improve every stage of the asylum seeker resettlement journey. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Joining me today are IDHS Acting Secretary Dulce Quintero, IDHS Lead on the Asylum Seeker Response, Kirsten Chernosky, and Matt DiMatteo, the Executive Director of New Life Centers of Chicagoland. New Life has been instrumental in helping recent arrivals find their next step, and I am truly grateful to Matt and New Life for their partnership. In August of 2022, the first bus of newly arrived asylum seekers reached the city of Chicago. Sent by Governor Abbott of Texas to sow chaos, they were dropped off with no warning and no coordination. It was and remains a callous effort to play politics with people's lives. But here in Illinois, we did what was right. We welcomed them. We swiftly organized to find shelter and food and the care that they needed to get on their feet. In the months since, the number of new arrivals seeking shelter has grown to over 24,000 people, a number we expect to continue to rise. Alongside our local partners, we have taken an unprecedented humanitarian response to meet this moment. From the state, that has meant hundreds of millions of dollars in state funding for shelter, staff, food, healthcare, transportation, rental assistance, direct funding to the city of Chicago, and more. It's what has been required to meet this moment. And at the state level, we are clear-eyed about the challenges that lay ahead for Chicago. There are thousands still sleeping at O'Hare, in police stations, and on sidewalks. And as I have warned for months now, winter is on its way. With Congress likely unwilling to act, and with lives of innocent people at stake, the hurdles we face seem far beyond the scope of any one state. And yet, everything we can do, we must do. Even with the state already funding the majority of the effort to provide basic necessities to the asylum seekers, more must be done. So today, I am laying out a comprehensive, data-driven plan to improve the response to the humanitarian crisis. It comes after a thorough analysis of data over the last year, from the arrival of asylum seekers in Chicago to their final transition to independent living. We have shared the plan with the city of Chicago, and they have asked us to work with them to implement it. Each facet of this plan is a fusion of data and community input, strategically designed to amplify the effectiveness of our investments and the movement of asylum seekers out of our system of care. You'll hear more about our community-based approach from Matt shortly. So for now, I'd like to spend a few minutes on the data. In May, the federal government lifted Title 42, ending 3 years of pandemic-era restrictions that turned away asylum seekers from the border. Around the same time, increasing surges of migrants fleeing places like Venezuela and Nicaragua brought even greater numbers to the border. What's happening in Illinois is a microcosm of this national story. This summer, Chicago had 250 to 550 arrivals per week. But in October, that turned into 1,000 to 3,000 arrivals per week. Those numbers have since reduced and leveled off at around 700 arrivals per week. But as you can see from the chart on the screen, the blue columns, which represent new arrivals each week, have continuously outpaced the purple columns, which represent the city's ability to move people out of shelters. As I mentioned, to date, we've seen more than 24,000 asylum seekers arrive in Illinois in need of shelter. There's a process associated with this. When the process is working, asylum seekers should flow through a pipeline. They are welcomed, they are provided temporary shelter, they move to independence. From August 2022 to today, nearly 9,000 individuals have flowed through this pipeline, from welcome to shelter to independent living, with state assistance and with the tremendous work of New Life. This is what happens when the pipeline works. During that 14-month period, nearly 12,500 individuals have moved through the welcome process and are now in some form of City of Chicago shelter, where they receive state-funded casework, housing assistance, and various other forms of support. But there are bottlenecks in the city's pipeline, and people get stuck. That's a major reason that you're seeing people living outside of police stations. Because of physical capacity constraints at city shelters, approximately 2,500 people are stuck at O'Hare, in police stations, and elsewhere in tents outside. Bottlenecks are compounding the city's problem. If you can't get to a shelter, you can't access the casework and receive the support necessary to get to independent living. The ultimate goal is for asylum seekers to reach independence, and that happens when people are able to get through this pipeline as quickly as possible. To get people off the streets as we head into winter, the state of Illinois will invest an additional $160 million via the Department of Human Services, specifically to address these bottlenecks, providing support to improve every stage of the asylum seeker resettlement journey. We'll call the three stages welcome, shelter, and independence. First, welcome. A portion of new arrivals don't need shelter as they have friends or family members here in Illinois or do not have Illinois as their final destination. Unfortunately, these individuals have often not been identified on the front end, and instead of moving on as they had originally intended, they end up in shelters where they unnecessarily take up capacity and resources. To address this, we're investing $30 million to establish a large intake center, growing the city's capacity to centrally welcome and comprehensively coordinate new arrivals' needs, including prioritizing onward movement in the pipeline. This investment will ensure both a more integrated approach across state, county, city, and CBO providers, but also more immediately divert new arrivals from shelters to their final destination, thereby improving available shelter capacity. The state is also funding a New Life team to deploy to the bus landing zone to ensure every new arrival is supported in a choice to seek alternate arrangements outside the city shelter system. With this approach, we anticipate reducing the number of people who need shelter by approximately 10%. Second, shelter. We need to rapidly increase city shelter capacity to get people off the streets and out of police stations and the airport. So we are investing $65 million to augment the City of Chicago's ability to stand up temporary housing for up to 2,000 people at any given time for as long as 6 months, prioritizing families and people with disabilities. These winterized soft shelter beds are interim or temporary and will operate as part of the existing City of Chicago shelter system. That will allow the city to keep people safe while the state can adequately supply wraparound services to keep people moving through the pipeline. Third, independence. Because of the state's investment in community-based wraparound services, just in the last month, the number of people moving out of shelters has increased by 65%. Remember, the sooner we can transition asylum seekers to independent living, the sooner they can get on their feet and become self-sufficient. The state of Illinois will use $65 million to expand our wraparound services for those in city shelters, while enabling a speedier transition to independent living. A cornerstone of this plan is a state-led effort to move thousands of individuals through the temporary protected status and employment authorization document processes. These are federal processes, and the state of Illinois does not determine federal timelines, but this is a more organized approach and will enable asylum seekers to pursue employment and achieve self-sufficiency as quickly as possible, allowing us to help more asylum seekers and ultimately alleviating the strain on state resources. The state has already begun to stand up workshops with legal aid providers and pro bono attorneys to facilitate the application process. These workshops will be co-located with federal immigration authorities and DCEO workforce programming so that federal checks and job search resources can be provided simultaneously. Over the next 10 to 12 weeks, we aim to help submit the applications of the roughly 11,000 eligible asylum seekers residing in city shelters, with thousands more to follow. I want to be clear that this plan is an all-hands-on-deck approach. We are working in partnership with the City of Chicago, Cook County, and our community-based partners on implementation. I want to take a moment here to thank Mayor Brandon Johnson, President Preckwinkle, New Life Centers, Catholic Charities of Chicago, the Greater Chicago Food Depository, the Resurrection Project, Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and the dozens of nonprofits in their network, our data analysts, and our countless other providers and volunteers for their incredible partnership on these efforts. And of course, Acting Secretary Dulce Quintero and her team at DHS for their incredible efforts to help put this plan together. So before I take your questions, and will, after Matt gets a chance to speak with you, I want to just close with this. I won't stand up here and pretend any of this is easy. We have a Congress abdicating its responsibility and border politicians using human beings as political pawns in their partisan games. Even with some help that we're getting from the federal government, we're being forced to try and solve a federal-sized problem at the state and local levels. Every day, we contend with impossible choices about how to use already scarce resources. In hard moments, it might be easier to look away, to not make the tough calls, to ignore the humanitarian need right in front of us. But when families come thousands of miles to seek refuge from terrible circumstances, who are we as human beings if we can't provide at least temporary refuge? The state that took my ancestors in, fleeing from pogroms in Ukraine, will not allow asylum seekers to freeze to death on our doorsteps. This is where we are right now. They are cold, so we will keep them warm. They are hungry, so we will feed them. They need our help, so we must do what we can. With that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Matt DiMatteo of New Life Centers of Chicago. And Matt?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The theme we want to have and what we've been living by is that we need each other. Our city is currently facing a global level crisis. As the governor shared, over 20,000 new arrivals have come to our city. Over 2,400 are sleeping in police stations and airports, many of them outside. They are men, women, and children made in the image of God that are fleeing horrific situations and coming to Chicago to find the hope, healing, opportunity, and community that we all have found here in our great city. And I want to bring a human face to this crisis. I want to tell you a story about one of our young people, hopeful, resilient, and a new vecino, a new neighbor here in our great city. Yoel is a 16-year-old boy that came to Chicago with his mom, stepdad, and 2 brothers in January of this year. They started in Little Village and couldn't afford an apartment, so they were moved to a shelter downtown. We were able to place them in an apartment, get the 3 boys settled into CPS, and Yoel found hope and community on the ball field. Yoel began to play baseball with us in Little Village and at Farragut High School. He did well in school, made friends with his baseball teammates, including my two children, Bella and Ben. He was selected as CPS Conference Player of the Year. He continued to play ball all summer with us and made the Cubs Charities Cubs RBI All-Stars youth travel team. Last month, we were able to reconnect him with other siblings and cousins as they arrived after a long journey from Venezuela. We continue to walk with Yoel and his family on the journey to healing. Hope, housing, play, resources, opportunity, legal support, tutoring, counseling, and community. And we have thousands of young people just like Yoel who need us. Yoel's cousin, Kimberly, who recently arrived and is staying in a shelter right now, is now playing basketball at Farragut with my daughter. They have a game tonight if anybody wants to come. They won their first game Tuesday night, and it was a beautiful sight to see. Harnessing hope, seizing opportunities, and building community, whether on the basketball court or within the vibrant streets of Chicago. We must rise above politics and division and come together. Since the first buses arrived, a collaborative effort between the city, county, state, and community-based organizations has come together to welcome new arrivals. All of us came together to build a system of shelter, care, and wraparound supports. This was all of us. New Life has been partnering with IDHS, and this partnership builds on long-standing relationships with community-based organizations and IDHS. It is a combination of expertise from the ground with new arrivals, including partnerships with Catholic Charities, ICER, the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Shower Up, Mutual Aid Volunteers, and dozens of other community-based organizations. Since May of this year, New Life has helped resettle over 1,500 families or 5,400 individuals. We have distributed over 51,000 emergency items to police stations and shelters. We have fed over 6,000 families per month through our Pan de Vida Fresh Market. We have welcomed 900 individuals per week at our Welcome Center. And we are now welcoming new arrivals in partnership with the city at the landing zone as they first arrive in Chicago. I'm hopeful to the future because the systems we are building now will create the pathways for care for all of the unhoused in Chicago. Let me say that again. I'm hopeful for the future because the systems we are building now will create the pathways to care for all of the unhoused in Chicago. It's not either or, it's both and not just a token statement, but truly building the systems of care that will change our city going forward. To build a strong safety net for our city's most vulnerable populations and strengthen the partnership with government resources and community-based leadership. Let's continue to work together. Let's continue to love together. Let's continue to partner together in building better for not only our current neighbors, our new neighbors, the unhoused, and let's show the world who Chicago truly is. We need each other. And I'd like to thank Governor Pritzker, Deputy Governor Ho, and Secretary Quintero for their continued leadership in making sure that everyone is welcome in Illinois. And now I'm going to read remarks in Spanish. Nuestra ciudad se enfrenta actualmente a una crisis a nivel mundial. Como compartió el gobernador, más de 20,000 recién llegados han llegado a nuestra ciudad. Más de 2,400 personas duermen en estaciones de policía y aeropuertos, muchos de ellos en el aire libre. Son hombres, mujeres y niños hechos a la imagen de Dios, que huyen de situaciones horribles y vienen a Chicago para encontrar la esperanza, la sanidad, la oportunidad y la comunidad que todos hemos encontrado aquí en nuestra gran ciudad. Quiero contarles una historia sobre uno de nuestros jóvenes, esperanzado, resiliente y un nuevo vecino. Joel es un chico de 16 años que llegó a Chicago con su mamá, su padrastro y sus 2 hermanos en enero de este año. Comenzaron en la villita y no podían pagar un apartamento, por lo que los trasladaron a un refugio en el centro. Pudimos ubicarlos en un apartamento, instalar a los 3 niños en CPS, y Joel encontró esperanza y comunidad en el campo de béisbol. Joel empezó a jugar béisbol con nosotros en la villita y en la escuela secundaria de Farragut. Le fue bien en la escuela, se hizo amigo de sus compañeros del equipo de béisbol, incluyendo a mis 2 hijos, Bella y Ben. Fue seleccionado como jugador del año de la conferencia CPS, continuó jugando béisbol todo el verano con nosotros y formó parte del equipo de los jóvenes de los Cachorros, the Cubs RBI All-Stars. El mes pasado pudimos reconectarlo con sus hermanos y primos que llegaron después de un largo viaje desde Venezuela. Seguimos acompañando a Joel y su familia rumbo a la esperanza con vivienda, juegos, recursos, oportunidades, apoyo legal, tutoría, asesoramiento y comunidad. Tenemos miles de jóvenes como Joel que nos necesitan. Kimberly, la prima de Joel, ahora está jugando baloncesto en Farragut con mi hija y anoche ganó su primer partido. En la cancha de baloncesto, en la comunidad, en Chicago, ha encontrado esperanza y conexión. Debemos elevarnos por encima de la política y la división y unirnos. Desde que llegaron los primeros autobuses, se ha unido un esfuerzo de colaboración entre la ciudad, el condado, el estado y las organizaciones comunitarias para dar la bienvenida a los recién llegados. Todos nos unimos para construir un sistema de refugio, atención y apoyo integral. Lo hemos hecho juntos. Nueva Vida se ha asociado con Illinois Department of Human Services y esta colaboración se basa en relaciones duraderas con organizaciones comunitarias y con IDHS. Es una combinación de lo que organizaciones como Catholic Charities, ICER, the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Shower Up, Mutual Aid Volunteers y más. Hemos aprendido ayudando a los recién llegados. Desde mayo de este año nuevo, Nueva Vida ha contribuido ayuda para establecer a más de 1,500 familias y 5,400 individuos. Hemos distribuido más que 51,000 artículos de emergencia a estaciones de policía y refugios. Hemos alimentado a más de 6,000 familias por mes a través de nuestra despensa de pan de vida. Hemos dado la bienvenida a un promedio de 900 personas por semana a nuestro centro de bienvenida en la villita. Y ahora estamos en la zona de aterrizaje junto con el equipo de la ciudad, dando la bienvenida a los recién llegados a Chicago. Tengo esperanza en el futuro porque los sistemas que estamos construyendo ahora crearon los caminos para cuidar a todos los que no tienen vivienda en Chicago, construir una red de seguridad sólida para las poblaciones más vulnerables de nuestra ciudad y fortalecer la asociación con los recursos gubernamentales y con el liderazgo comunitario. Sigamos trabajando juntos. Sigamos amándonos a unos a otros y sigamos asociándonos juntos para poder construir mejor. Para nuestros vecinos actuales y para nuestros nuevos vecinos, los que no tienen vivienda, y mostrarle al mundo quién es realmente Chicago. Nos necesitamos el uno al otro. Me gustaría agradecer gobernador Pritzker, gobernadora diputada Ho y al secretario Quintero por su continuo liderazgo en garantizar que todos sean bienvenidos a Illinois. And now I'd like to welcome back Governor Pritzker for questions.
Thanks very much. Happy to take, yeah, Hannah.
From where exactly in DHS's budget is the $160 million coming? Like, are there programs or hiring that you identified as maybe not an immediate need that are being delayed, or programs that are underused, things that never got off the ground but have had repeated appropriations that you're pulling from?
So there are lines in the IDHS budget that are, exactly for the purposes of providing services, wraparound services, as we're calling them, to people who are living in the state of Illinois. And those are the places that we're pulling dollars from to assist these asylum seekers that are coming.
Governor, a couple months ago, you stood in front of us and said you had concerns about the idea of housing migrants in Texas.
Yeah.
In the meantime, have those concerns been addressed, or is this an indication that really the city and state are out of better options right now for housing these people?
Well, just to be clear, the city is in charge of a shelter system. They're the ones who are building out shelters, generally speaking, and this is a reflection of the fact that winter is upon us very shortly. Next week, as you know, the temperature around Thanksgiving will be around 20 degrees in the city of Chicago. So this is, again, temporary housing, very important to emphasize that. And as we're speeding up the process of moving people through this, welcoming and then temporary shelter and then independent living, that we intend to not have people stay in temporary shelter for too long. And indeed, that is a reflection, again, of the fact that we are heading into winter very shortly, and that not enough shelter space has been created between the last couple of months when I said that and now.
But should this have, we knew in the summer that winter was coming. Should
Yes.
this have gotten off the ground faster?
Yes, but again, that's the state is not in charge of the shelter system for the city of Chicago.
Governor, just to
Yeah.
dovetail on the timing of this,
Sure.
that's kind of what I'm stuck on and curious about. I know Illinois has made a number of commitments in this endeavor already, but we have known that winter is coming. So shouldn't this level of coordination happen months ago?
We've been coordinating and providing services for the city for a year plus 14 months.
But this specific program of streamlining and a shelter space and an intake center, why now? Why shouldn't we have talked about this in July?
Well, the city's been operating its own methodology process, right? And it hasn't moved fast enough. So we've done a complete data analysis of everything that's happened really for the last 14 months to determine exactly where the bottlenecks are. And so we're bringing our resources in to try to flatten out those bottlenecks, make sure that people are moving through faster, and make sure that the city is building shelter faster.
So did the city push back on previous offers to do something like this?
The city never asked us for assistance on that. We were offering all along whatever the city may want, but it is the state that's been providing a certain level of services, right? We're doing the wraparound services. They've been mostly in charge of the shelter, and it is the city's shelter system, again, that's running all these shelters. And once again, we're stepping in here to try to help and accelerate this process. It isn't moving fast enough. That's why you're seeing people still on the street, and we just can't have people on the street. This is a humanitarian endeavor. We cannot have people freezing on the streets of Chicago as we head into very cold weather.
What is the timeline for opening this large intake center or the other shelter situations that you're helping?
The shelter situation that we're assisting with is going to be dependent on the city turning over a property to us. That's going to be up to them entirely. Speeding up the front end, the welcoming and the intake is something that will begin nearly immediately. Indeed, we're already working on it.
Is there a location identified though? Like, are we talking weeks, a month?
Again, working in conjunction with the city, we're going to be doing it where they and we agree is a good spot for that. Sorry, yeah.
The goal to get 11,000 applications in by February.
Yeah.
Isn't that process still going to take a year after that?
No.
How quickly can somebody submit an application
Well, the good news is that the federal government really has sped up that process. That used to be the case, what you were describing, where it was months and months of waiting for work authorization. They recognized, and you, I think, recall that the mayor and I and Senator Durbin and others had a press conference, and we had been communicating for some months about the need to speed up that process. And then the federal government did step in and indeed expanded the ability for TPS folks who'd come here before July to be able to get work authorizations. Now they've sped up the process for approving those work authorizations. So we believe that by February, all the applications will come in, and during the time between now and February, there will be many people who will already have received word that they are authorized to work.
Governor, can you clarify just
Yeah.
a little more about these shelters? The money that you're providing the city is for them to set up these base camp tent shelters type of thing, or where's that money to be utilized for?
I think I went through the various segments of the $160 million. Some of it is to assist the city in setting up temporary shelter.
Are you talking about the base camps that they have already talked about setting up?
Well, hopefully it's in addition to what they're already setting up, but we are providing what we are, able to provide for them, which is we'll hold, roughly 2,000 people. We can provide you with some more detail. There was a briefing that occurred at 9 o'clock this morning for many reporters, and I know we can provide you the data.
So essentially, the city's given this money, they can then use it how they see fit?
No, the state is providing this. We are the ones who are contracting for the city, right? So there's no handoff to the city of here's $160 million. The state is in fact continuing to do what it has been doing, providing resources from the state, contracting from the state, working with New Life, for example, and making sure that we're getting the contracting done for the other pieces of this process that we're putting in place to break down the barriers in the pipeline.
Will that be run by the city or the state? Sorry.
The city is running the shelter system. We are not. We are doing what we've been doing all along, which is providing all the wraparound, not all, but many of the wraparound services, including, by the way, the immigration assistance, making sure people move through the TPS system. We brought the federal government in to work alongside of us in order to get that done. So I just wanted to make sure you understand the state doesn't run shelters.
But Governor, I mean, folks in your administration, folks at City Hall, in some instances have been talking for like a year now about actual bricks and mortar shelter options, various shuttered retail stores where people could go. Why haven't any of those things gotten up there? What have been the?
I don't know. You'll have to ask the city. They run the shelter system. We've been absolutely encouraging the city to find bricks and mortar shelter. I'm not criticizing. I'm just suggesting that now here we are. We're, right up against winter and very cold weather, and we want to make sure that no one is left outside.
Did the city come to you and say we need help? Have they waved the white flag and said, we're here at this juncture, winter, Thanksgiving is next week. We don't have tents up. I mean, I guess that's our hang up in trying to, get out information is that, it's hard pressed to get information out of the city from where these tents are gonna be.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing locations from you, Governor, on where these are gonna be.
Right.
Where are we gonna see these things?
Well, because the state doesn't own property, the state doesn't control property in the city of Chicago that could provide, a location. The city really has to do that. But we talk to the city literally every day and try to be responsive to their needs. Once again, we've been in charge of certain kinds of things in this process. And coming up to, now that we're very close to winter, it is clear that the city needs more help. And so the state is now stepping in to provide some of that help, to do the contracting, to up the game when it comes to breaking through the barriers in the pipeline. This is a challenge that no doubt everybody's aware of, but with the very cold weather upon us, the state is now having to step in and be, more aggressive. And again, every day, just to be clear, my team, the team at DHS, I should say, for the state, is on the phone or in person. Indeed, we have people embedded with the city talking about what are the needs at the various locations that the state can provide, knowing what it is that we have available to us. But it is our data analysis that ultimately led to kind of a change of program here where we're providing these new services and making sure that we're pushing through people in this process. And I'd focus on that flow, because that, to me, is the important change that's occurring here. We're trying to speed people through that flow by providing help on the front end and moving people from temporary shelter into more permanent living.
Governor, according to one of the data sheets, the Asylum Seeker Emergency Rental Assistance Program had been providing help for up to 6 months of housing. Now rental assistance is just going to cover 3 months. So why reduce that program?
Well, again, we're trying to move the process more quickly, and so we're sort of notifying everybody up front that we expect everybody that's in shelter to be working with the providers in order to get them to some sort of independence. And that's really more notification, making sure that they are aware.
I think that perhaps though, I mean, I feel like there are already stories about individuals who are independent for a little bit and then they can't make rent because 3 months isn't enough time to get on their feet, have a job, be able to pay their rent. So is that reducing
Go over the data on that, because we actually have data on that. Kirsten, you can-
Yeah, Kirsten, maybe I'll step up.
Absolutely. So the ASRAP program, the Asylum Seeker Emergency Rental Assistance Program, previously was a 3-month with the option to renew for an additional 3 months for up to a total of 6 months. In shortening it to 3 months, there's 2 main priorities. The first is that we currently have enough funds left in that program to reach everyone that is currently in shelter. So the folks that are in shelter that have been demonstrating that they are working towards finding independent housing will have access to that program. This allows us to tell all new arrivals there is no more emergency rental assistance available, so that folks who are choosing to come to Chicago understand what it is that they are coming into. For the individuals that will be going from the up to 6 months to the up to 3 months, they will continue to have a variety of wraparound supports available to them while they are living in independent housing that will allow them to maintain that housing through case management, through the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, through the ongoing Illinois Welcoming Center program, through partnerships they're making with New Life and the supplies New Life is providing them so that they are set up to succeed in that independent housing. We feel that this shift from 6 to 3 months will still allow folks to continue along their journey to independence.
So when do you have to have arrived by to be eligible? When is that, there's no more money left in the program? What is the start date?
The new program will be effective tomorrow. And this is part of that partnership that we are doing with the city of Chicago, and both the state and city announcing policy changes that will work in conjunction.
So folks voting tomorrow should not expect to be able to get access to the ASRAP program?
It's not based on when you arrive to the city, it's based on when you arrive to shelter.
So like if you're in an airport, so like if you're in an airport and not in a shelter and you're not processed, that would count as people who are in shelter.
Correct.
Sorry.
Governor, as you're moving people through the pipeline and sending people on to other cities if they want to go to other places, how do you make sure that you're not creating problems for other cities that cities like Denver have created for Chicago?
I want to recharacterize what you said. We're not sending anybody anywhere.
Helping them move along to other districts.
Only when people are arriving here and saying, I have relatives in Michigan I'm trying to get to, or I have relatives elsewhere I'm trying to get to. We're simply making sure that they don't get lost in a bureaucracy that puts them into temporary shelter and then moves, is trying to move them through into independent living in Chicago. If in fact they arrived here with the intention of leaving, we want to make sure they're sheltered for however long they need to make that transfer to go to their family or friends.
But will officials in those other cities be notified that folks are coming from Chicago to San Francisco or New York or wherever they might be?
We don't know necessarily where they're going, so they may tell us, they may not tell us, but they certainly will. We will ask, are you moving along to another place? Do you have relatives elsewhere? Do you intend to stay here? They may not offer that information, and that isn't information that we're intending to, somehow distribute everywhere. People have the right to go anywhere that they want to once they're legally in this country. And so we're not going to, monitor them and report them as arriving elsewhere.
We have time for one more. Is the city's 60-day limit on shelter stays humane, and especially as we're getting into winter, is it keeping with the state's commitment to caring for people?
Well, I think you saw that CPZ, that Christina Passione-Zayas, made some remarks yesterday. Sorry, if you're in Springfield long enough with her, you start calling her CPZ. But the deputy mayor said yesterday, talked about the fact that no one is going to be kicked out. This is not a, it's your last day, good luck in 20-degree weather or colder. It's a process, it's a policy. I think you heard Kirsten say, the idea here is to move people through the process as quickly as possible and to have those folks talking about and thinking about what is their next step and working with the state to the extent that they need help to get to that next step.
Governor, will the welcoming center, the site, be within the city of Chicago?
I presume so. Again, this is a city decision, and I believe that the city has always been looking at locations within the city.
And just back to the timing of this.
That's the last one.
So we'll get this, yeah. Last one.
The city has been requesting additional help from the state for months. Are you saying because they didn't identify a specific dollar amount or a specific funding request for X, Y, and Z, is that why the state didn't step in sooner? Like why?
When you say step in sooner, we've been working with them all along, and indeed, we have spent much more money to support the system of asylum seekers arriving here than the city has. So, I want to make sure you understand that's the case. I also would say that to the extent that the city is looking for dollars and not assistance, then it needs to go to the General Assembly and make the case for that. In Springfield, they have not done that. They did not do that. Both of us have been talking directly, though, to the federal government, to the White House, to the Congress, to try to get those dollars from Washington, because as I said at the beginning of this press conference, this is a federal-sized problem that the city and state both are dealing with, and it requires federal resources, but it appears that at least the Republican-controlled House so far has been unwilling to provide it. I do think that the president is trying hard, included that in his efforts to get a supplemental done through Congress, and we'll see what happens in the next few months.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.